When it was announced that Rabbi Sherman and I would serve as your co-senior rabbis here at Sinai Temple, only one question was asked. Clergy, congregants, and friends, everyone basically asked the same version of the following question. Rabbis, are you ready? And each time I was asked the question, I would look at the person in the eye and say with confidence, I'm ready. But inside, I couldn't help but wonder time and time again, what exactly does ready mean? Do I desire to shape the vision of this congregation? Do I find deep fulfillment in learning each and every one of your stories? Do I want to officiate at your B'nai Mitzvah, your weddings, walk with you in grief, comfort you in times of struggle, and celebrate with you in times of joy? Resoundingly, yes. But what does it mean to be ready? For the past year, I tried to answer my questions. I spoke with countless senior rabbis across the country and other faith leaders. I decided to read books like Think Like a CEO and Your First 100 Days Making Maximum Impact in Your New Role. I cleared my email box, which took a very long time, so that I would be available for anything that came my way, and that lasted exactly 1 hour. Rabbi Sherman and I spent months preparing and creating a vision that we are proud of. But through my conversations and my research and my reading, I always came back to the very same answer. I don't think there is just one thing, just one task that prepares any of us for the moments of a lifetime, because readiness isn't achieved by checking off things on a to-do list. Rather, readiness comes from discovering and rediscovering exactly who we are. In those moments that choose us, are any of us ever really ready? Were you ready for your freshman year at college? Were you ready to stand under the chuppah as a bride or a groom? Were you ready to be an empty nester? Were you ready for retirement? I think some of you are saying yes. There are courses for college readiness, sessions for premarital therapy, books about how to transition through life's most major stages, all of which I would recommend. But what prepares us for our first real heartbreak? What prepares us when the doctor hands us our child for the very first time and says, "Here you go"? In fact, I remember after our first child, Annie, was born, Erez and I looked at each other and thought to ourselves, are you actually going to let us take her home? Are you sure about that? And what readies us? When the ones that we love the most leave this world, and we will begin living in this world without their tangible presence. I don't know what prepares someone to brace themselves upon hearing those initial shovelfuls of dirt upon their loved one's grave. I'm not sure we're ever ready for any of it, for all of it. I was having this conversation with a friend, and she said, we squander so much time worrying, so much time researching who we think we should be, who others think we should be. But in this world, we spend very little time embracing who we are. But I believe this is precisely the message of Yom Kippur, to stand before our Creator and to be judged not by someone else's standards, but by exactly how God sees us today, because today, God doesn't have a filter. You see, the Talmud explains that when a person stands before God in those moments in which we leave this earth, God will ask us a series of questions in the world to come. God will ask us, did you conduct your business ethically? God will ask us, did you lead a meaningful life? And God will ask us, did you await salvation? Meaning, did you have hope in a greater tomorrow? Jewish philosopher Martin Buber shares the story about Reb Zusia. Reb Zusia passes away and stands before God, and Reb Zusia has a little bit of time. There's a line. And so he thinks to himself, what exactly will God ask me in this moment? Will God say to me, Reb Zusia, why didn't you live your life more like Moses? Or will God say, Reb Zusia, why didn't you live your life more like King Solomon? And finally, when the time comes for Reb Zusia to stand before God, God doesn't ask those questions to Reb Zusia at all. God simply asks, Zusia, why weren't you more like Zusia? One day, when we too stand before our Creator, will God ask us, why weren't you ready to be more like you? In the exquisite book, Bittersweet, we are introduced to management thinker Susan David. Susan David teaches a workshop, and she asks her students to write a thought on a Post-it, a thought that continuously holds them back. Examples from her students: I'm a fraud, I'm needy, I'm anxious, I'm selfish. And then she asks her students to take off their shoes and place their Post-it next to the shoes. But then she asks her students to get up from their seats, pick up someone else's Post-it, to consider the struggles of the human who walks in those shoes. The teacher asks them, what does it feel like to read someone else's private confessions? Confessions that clearly are easier to write on a Post-it than to share with our closest family and friends. And the response is, no matter the shoes we wear, no matter the paths on which we walk, we're not alone. That somehow we're all struggling. Instead of trying so hard to fill someone else's shoes, why aren't we proudly trying so hard to fill our own? This afternoon, I want to share a story of wonder immersed in heartbreak. I walked into a hospital room a few months ago to visit a dear congregant who has since passed away. And when I came to see this congregant, his eyes were closed, he was sleeping, and sitting quietly in the room were his devoted parents. His mother embraced me, his father gave me a hug, and his mom started to ask me about how Rabbi Sherman's and my senior rabbinates were going at Sinai Temple. But she didn't ask me if I was ready. Instead, she said, Rabbi Guzik, if I may, some advice. Don't think about filling someone else's shoes because they'll never fit. Instead, she said, I want you to think about the people who are lifting you up, people like me, people you know and people you may never meet. We are lifting you up. You stand on your shoulders for you to just be you, and in return, upon your shoulders, others will stand. To this congregant who's here this afternoon, thank you. Because I stand before you ready to be me. A rabbi who has served this congregation for 18 years. A lucky, lucky wife. A busy, blessed mother of 3. A daughter of 2 dedicated parents and sister to 3 younger, wonderful siblings. A grandchild who learned from her grandparents to put her Judaism first and to be proud of her Jewish identity. And I stand on the shoulders of the great rabbis of Sinai Temple and the shoulders of teachers and confidants, all who inspire me to lead. And most of all, I stand on your shoulders, on my beloved Sinai temple. And there lies in the essence of what God wants for each of us during these precious moments of life, to never stop discovering who we are, and in this next chapter, who we are meant to become. But think for a moment. Upon whose shoulders do you stand? Who tirelessly lifts you up? Whose voices propel you forward, reminding you that your purpose continues to unfold? Last night at Kol Nidre, we wore a talit, a prayer shawl. I mention this because it's the only evening in the year in which we wear a talit, blending the light of day with the darkness of night. And if you think about it, the talit, it's the only ritual garment that we wear upon our shoulders. Ask someone the story of their talit, where they received it, where they got it from, who it's from. Some of us wear the prayer shawls of our parents, our grandparents, of family members. For others, the talit was one that was worn under the chuppah. Each thread of the talit represents another story of the Jewish people. And we wear the stories of our people on our shoulders to root us, to ground us, wrapped and embraced by thousands of years of Jewish history, connected to our ancestors, and linked to those that lift us up. And it is today, before the Yizkor service, when we remember most that we stand upon the shoulders of the departed. For we may never feel completely ready to say goodbye to those we love the most. And I'm not speaking about the preparation that we should do, making ethical wills, making end-of-life arrangements for ourselves and for others. But I'm speaking about not being able to be ready for the final moments, because how do we grasp the final moments? We crave too much. The squeeze of a hand, a conversation left unfinished, sitting together doing absolutely nothing, hearing their voice on the other side of the phone, playing, laughing, arguing, teasing, hugging, holding. In his book, Grief, philosopher Michael Cholby writes, "For many, grief feels like the loss of self, a loss of us. For when we say goodbye to those we love, it often feels as if we are saying goodbye to a piece of ourselves. And for some, it feels as if we are saying goodbye to our heart." No, readiness may never come when someone leaves this world. Years may go by and we still aren't prepared for the finality that death brings. As author Nora McKierney describes in a TED Talk after her husband passes away, she says, moving on isn't the same as moving forward. She said she hasn't moved on from her husband because how can she? Instead, she moves forward with him. We don't move on without them. We move with. Who are we as we face the biggest milestones of our lives? We stand not alone, but upon the shoulders of those in the world to come, those that continue to move with us in this world, lifting us up and holding us close. In the Sfat Emet, we are taught that the human heart is considered the tablet of God, the tablet on which God writes. And the word life is engraved on the heart by God's own hand. But throughout the year, that engraving, the word life, it's covered with dirt. It's covered with grit. As months go by, it becomes harder and harder to see that word life because the word is obscured, hidden by neglected priorities, hidden by our busy nature, but most of all, hidden by forgetting who we are. And on Rosh Hashanah, we ask God to yet again engrave the word life upon our hearts. But on Yom Kippur, Today we ask God to seal our hearts so that we may embrace life anew. But before God seals our hearts today, I want you to take a moment to close your eyes and let your loved one's story become embedded in your own. They move with us, changing and shaping our spirit in the ways in which we honor their lives. For in life's greatest and most challenging moments, the moments that choose us, what matters is who we are and who we believe we can become. The memories of the departed provide the strength of our foundation. Proudly, we stand upon their shoulders and we say to them, because of you, we are ready. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we all be inscribed in the book of life. Amen.